There is a moment in every great man's story where the curtain finally falls, not on his talent, not on his legacy, but on his time here on earth. For Dean Martin, that moment came quietly, on Christmas morning, 1995. No grand farewell. No packed auditorium. Just the soft stillness of a December day in Beverly Hills, and the passing of a man who had made the entire world feel like it was leaning back in a comfortable chair, drink in hand, without a care in the world. But when his family gathered in the days that followed, what they discovered wasn't just grief. It was something far more complicated, a fortune carefully built over 5 decades, a legacy stretching far beyond any single song or film, and the overwhelming weight of inheriting the life's work of a man who had turned poverty, heartbreak, and loss into something that would outlive him by generations. Some of his children wept from sadness. Some wept from gratitude. And some, those who truly understood what their father had quietly constructed behind the scenes, wept simply because they finally understood the full measure of who Dean Martin really was. This is the story of how a boy with nothing built everything, and what he left behind when he was gone. Dino Paul Crosetti was born on June 7, 1917, in Steubenville, Ohio, to Italian immigrant parents who had crossed an ocean in search of something better. His father, Gaetano, was a barber. His mother, Angela, raised the family with the warmth and stubbornness that Italian mothers are famous for. They were not wealthy. They were not connected. They were simply a family trying to survive in a country that didn't always make it easy for people who looked or sounded different. When young Dino started school, he spoke almost no English. The teasing was immediate and relentless. Other children mocked his accent, his name, his foreignness. But rather than retreating into shame, Dino discovered something early that would define the rest of his life: he could make people laugh. A well-timed joke, a self-deprecating smile, a casual shrug that said nothing really bothers me, these became his armor. And eventually, they became his art. By the time he was a teenager, school had lost its appeal entirely. He dropped out at 16, convinced that the real education was out there somewhere in the world, not locked inside a classroom. What followed was a collection of experiences that would have broken a lesser spirit. He worked in a steel mill, enduring the kind of punishing physical labor that leaves marks on a man's body and soul. He took up boxing under the name Kid Crochet, fighting 12 matches and winning, by his own amused admission, just one of them. He came out the other side with a crooked nose, scarred knuckles, and a quiet, unshakable toughness that no amount of fame would ever fully dissolve. During the Prohibition years, young Dino ran liquor, worked as a blackjack dealer in underground gambling clubs, and moved through the shadowy edges of nightlife with the ease of someone born to it. These weren't glamorous choices, they were survival. But they gave him something that money could never buy: an authentic understanding of human nature, of what people wanted, of how to read a room and own it. When he finally turned to music, everything changed. He started singing in small clubs in the early 1940s, calling himself Dino Martini after the famous opera singer. A bandleader named Sammy Watkins heard him perform and gave him advice that would reshape his entire future: change the name. And so Dino Martini became Dean Martin, and Dean Martin became, in time, one of the most beloved entertainers the world has ever known. His early years were far from smooth. He flopped badly at a prestigious New York club, the kind of public failure that sends most people quietly home. But Dean wasn't most people. He kept going, kept refining, kept trusting in that loose, unhurried style that made him sound like he was singing just for you, specifically for you, in a room with no one else around. Then came Jerry Lewis. The two men met in 1945, and what began as an accidental collision, Lewis crashing Martin's act at the Glass Hat Club with his wild, unscripted comedy, quickly became something that neither man had planned and both men needed. Their partnership was electric. Martin's smooth, warm vocal presence grounded everything, while Lewis's unpredictable physical comedy sent it spinning into the stratosphere. Together they were greater than the sum of their parts, and audiences knew it instantly. Their defining breakthrough came in July 1946 at the 500 Club in Atlantic City. Booked originally as separate acts, they decided on a whim to combine their performances, and what unfolded that night was the kind of genuine, unrepeatable chemistry that can't be manufactured. By the early 1950s, Martin and Lewis were the most popular entertainment duo in America, performing to packed houses, starring in Hollywood films, hosting their own radio show, and eventually taking over television with the Colgate Comedy Hour. In 1951 alone, they earned the equivalent of over $100 million in today's money. They were untouchable. But fame is a strange and complicated partner. As the years went on, Dean began to feel the discomfort of a man who knew he was more than the role he'd been assigned. Jerry received the loudest applause, the most prominent magazine coverage, the creative control. Dean was the handsome, smooth-voiced presence in the background, essential but somehow invisible. He had built this empire alongside his partner, and yet he was slowly disappearing inside it. The split came in 1956. It was painful, public, and final. Most people in the entertainment industry quietly assumed that Dean Martin's best years were behind him. They were wrong. What followed the breakup of Martin and Lewis was one of the most remarkable second acts in entertainment history. Dean Martin didn't reinvent himself. He deepened himself. He leaned further into the effortless charm that had always been his greatest gift, while simultaneously expanding his range in ways that surprised everyone who had underestimated him. His dramatic turn in the 1958 war film The Young Lions alongside Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift announced to the world that Dean Martin was a serious actor capable of genuine emotional weight. Critics who had written him off as a comedian's sidekick were forced to reconsider. His music career entered its most commercially successful period during this same stretch of time. The songs he released in the late 1950s and early 1960s became stitched into the cultural fabric of the era. Voila crossed borders and climbed charts on both sides of the Atlantic. That's Amore became the kind of song that people didn't just enjoy, they carried it with them, associated it with the happiest evenings of their lives. And then in 1964, Everybody Loves Somebody accomplished something that even Dean himself might not have predicted. It knocked the Beatles off the top of the American charts, proving that in a world being turned upside down by the British invasion, there was still a massive audience for the warm, unhurried pleasure of Dean Martin's voice. Meanwhile, his friendship with Frank Sinatra had grown into something that would define an era. The Rat Pack, Sinatra, Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford, became the most glamorous, most envied, most imitated circle of entertainers in the world. Their residences at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas were legendary not just for the performances but for the atmosphere they created, an intoxicating sense that you were watching something spontaneous and exclusive, that these men were genuinely having the time of their lives and had generously invited you along. Dean's role in this group was unique. Where Sinatra commanded the room and Davis dazzled it, Dean relaxed it. He was the man who made everything feel possible and nothing feel too serious. It was a skill. It was art. His television show, which ran on NBC from 1965 to 1974, brought that art into living rooms across America for 9 full years. 264 episodes of music, comedy, and the kind of warmth that television rarely achieves. He won a Golden Globe. He made celebrities look human. He made audiences feel that they were being welcomed, not performed at. When the format evolved into the legendary Dean Martin Celebrity Roasts, he found yet another gear. A wickedly funny, generously spirited master of ceremonies who could land a cutting joke and make the target laugh harder than anyone else in the room. Behind all of this public brilliance, Dean Martin was building something that most people never saw. He was not reckless with his money. He was not naive about his industry. He understood, perhaps better than many of his contemporaries, that entertainment careers are seasonal, brilliant and then gone, and that the only lasting security was in the things that remained after the applause faded. He invested in real estate at a time when Beverly Hills property was still within reach of careful calculation. His home there, purchased for $120,000, was expanded over the years into a substantial estate. He acquired property in Palm Springs. He ensured that his music and television work was protected through licensing arrangements that would continue generating income long after he stopped performing. Most significantly, he established the Dean Martin Family Trust. This legal structure was built with care and intention, designed to manage the ongoing royalties from his recordings, his television catalog, and the licensing of his name and image. It was, in essence, a declaration of responsibility, a father's way of saying that the love he had for his children would outlast his own heartbeat. He had 8 children across 3 marriages. Craig, Claudia, Gail, and Deanna from his first marriage to Betty McDonald. Ricky, Dean Paul, and Gina from his marriage to Jean Bega. And Sasha, whom he adopted through his 3rd marriage to Catherine Horn. He treated them all as his own. His daughter Deanna has spoken publicly about a childhood filled not with Hollywood distance but with genuine warmth, family dinners, laughter, a father who never let fame replace presence. His son Ricky once described how Dean brought together children from different mothers and made them all feel like one family, not a collection of complicated arrangements. Then came 1987. And everything broke. Dean Paul Martin, his son, a young man of 35, a National Guard pilot, was on a routine training flight when his jet disappeared into the San Gorgonio mountain range in California. The wreckage was found in the snow. There were no survivors. People who knew Dean Martin have said that he was never truly the same after that day. The man who had spent his entire life making the world feel light and easy was carrying something that no performance could address, no audience could heal. He withdrew. He turned down enormously lucrative offers. He stepped back from the reunion tour he had planned with Sinatra and Davis. He began spending his days in small, quiet ways, on the golf course, in front of old Western films, in the company of a few trusted friends. Those who saw him in these final years described a man who was present but quieter, who smiled but differently, who had survived something that had permanently rearranged his interior world. He died on Christmas Day, 1995. He was 78 years old. His fortune at the time of his passing was estimated at $30 million, a number that represented not just earnings but discipline, foresight, and a deep, abiding love for the people he would leave behind. When his children came to terms with what their father had left them, the emotion was overwhelming. It wasn't simply the money, though the money was significant. It was the understanding that even in his quietest years, even when grief had taken the energy out of him, Dean Martin had continued to think about them. The trust he had established continued to generate income from streaming platforms, from television reruns, from merchandise and licensing arrangements. In 2023, a major deal was signed with the iconic artists group to actively manage and expand his legacy, bringing his music and his story to entirely new generations through modern channels, film projects, and carefully chosen partnerships. His daughter Deanna has made the stewardship of that legacy a central part of her own life. She tours internationally performing his music, sharing stories about the man behind the myth, keeping the connection between audiences and her father alive in a way that feels personal rather than commercial. She wrote a memoir, Memories Are Made of This, Dean Martin Through His Daughter's Eyes, that offers a rare and tender portrait of who he was when the cameras weren't on. That memoir is currently being developed into a film. She also organizes the annual Dean Martin Festival in Steubenville, Ohio, the town where a young Italian boy with a broken English accent first learned that laughter could turn strangers into friends.